Okay, shall we get started? Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
This is the Survivors Club. No, it's really great to have so many of you here. And we've got a great program for you this morning. We're going to start with a keynote from Nikki, which is really going to set us up for the entire morning. So we're going to focus a lot this morning on an absolutely fabulous meeting that we had in Cape Town back in May, which created a lot of educational outputs, many of which we're going to be working on in the web workshop session later on. So we'll kick off with Nikki's talk, then we have a coffee break. We come back to learn about the mastery rubric with Jessica, which I know many of us have been eagerly anticipating. And then we've got a couple of hours in which to workshop and in which you can all have your input into many of the things that we've been working on in the ISCB and in the bioinformatics education community as a whole for many years, actually. And we needed a week to closet ourselves away and really focus on delivering something. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Nikki to the podium. I've known Nikki for a very long time. I'm a bit hazy on what you did before your EBI days, but we overlapped extensively at the EBI where Nikki developed the Interpro service. She then spent 4 years hopping between South Africa and the UK with a role at ISMB and a joint role at the EBI. And she then moved to the University of Cape Town, where, among other things, she set up the H3A Bionet consortium, which is a pan-African consortium to build bioinformatics capacity, and has done some absolutely amazing, groundbreaking work, some of which we heard about yesterday. So, Nikki, over to you. Thank you. If I can shut my talk down and find yours. There we go.
Thanks, Kath, and thanks to everybody for waking up early on this last day. Everyone is like is exhausted, and I was expecting to be talking to 3 people. So I'm going to be talking, as Kath said, quite a lot about the summit that we had, but it's all about addressing some of the needs. So I'm just going to set the scene with some of the needs that we have. So I'm going to talk about what is the general need for bioinformatics skills, which I think most of you know about, some of our experiences with diverse training audiences and modalities, and how some of the challenges came out of that. Some of the challenges including the increasing demand trainers and trainees, and then how we brought everyone together to address some of these challenges, and then I'll discuss some of the outputs of the Cape Town meeting so that you set the scene for the workshop today. So I think there's no doubt that there's a huge need for bioinformatics skills. And I think the problem is that the level of skills and the actual skill is so different for different people. Different employers require different things in terms of topic area, in terms of level of ability. And when I want to employ somebody, I don't know, how do I know that they have the right bioinformatics skills out of that entire broad range of skills? So many years back, the ISCB actually ran a survey of people from the ISCB Education Committee and from the EMB net community. There were nearly 80 people from 30 different countries, and that was to identify some of the topics that were needed. And then there was also a survey of employers from, say, corp facilities, for example, to look at what kind of skills were required. So the kind of topics that came out were obviously a range of topics from programming, software engineering, statistics and probability, databases, algorithm development. So it's very kind of skills, quantitative based. And then on top of that, obviously, is all the specialist skills. So that's the cellular molecular biology, genomics, basic biology, evolutionary biology, and genetics. And this was reported in a paper that came out a few years ago from the committee. When there was a survey for skills from employers, there was a need for people who could do data interpretation, problem solving, but also communication and being able to report things properly. So if you're a core services facility bioinformatician, you need to be able to interact with the client, and you need to be able to serve the information in a particular way. The employers also wanted people who were motivated and self-motivated, independent, because if you certainly in my group, I've got so many different people working in the group. I can't be an expert in everything, so I need them to actually be reasonably independent and be able to look up things themselves. They had an issue that the employees lacked experience, practical experience in real biological data analysis. So they might have had the skills, but they might not have actually been able to, had many opportunity to implement those skills. And as I said, certainly from my perspective, when I hire people or when people come to do a PhD, it's really difficult to see from their CV what skills they have. They say, I've got a master's in bioinformatics. And unless they go to that particular program and see what did you learn, sometimes they come and all they've done is structural bioinformatics, and actually they have no skills whatsoever in basic programming or statistics. So different people need different levels of competencies in different topics. So from our perspective, we've had a range of different audiences that we've needed to train. So that's anything from your biologists to geneticists to clinicians and nurses. But then also we have mathematicians and we have people who are systems administrators. So their job is simply to manage the bioinformatics software on their cluster. So it's a big range of audiences, and we've also had a big range of topics that we needed to teach. So from basic programming, Linux, to systems administration, to genomic medicine, genetics, NGS, and then very specific topics. So we've tried to categorize our trainers into 3 types: the bioinformatics user, the bioinformatics scientist, and the bioinformatics engineer. And some of these different groups will fit. So the bioinformatics user might be a clinician or a nurse, but they will again have very different needs in terms of the skills that they need, because they will hopefully be using downstream tools. They'll need a little bit of information about how the data was generated to be able to interpret it, but it's going to be different to a bioinformatics scientist who really needs to know the integral parts of the algorithms and be able to run them and even tweak them, and then the bioinformatics engineer who's going to be developing visualization tools or new algorithms. So we started, we actually had a workshop many years ago in Botswana to try and work out what in our opinion, if people were starting new master's degree programs in Africa, what topics would they need? So again, then we split into the bioinformatics engineer versus the bioinformatics scientist. Obviously, we don't think a master's is really for a bioinformatics user. It's really somebody who's going to be using bioinformatics for a very large percentage of their time. And so we developed a curriculum based on this, and that was actually based on some of the output of that survey that led, of the ISCB survey that led to a set of guidelines and suggested topics. We based our curriculum on that. And then we developed a guidelines document so that's looking at a set of core and elective modules. So there's some fundamental things that actually any bioinformatician should know. You should know some basic statistics, obviously basic programming, and then have some elective modules, and that often is determined by the university. So if a university is very good in proteomics, then maybe that is going to be mass spec is going to be the main topic of interest. So I think those elective modules are fairly flexible, but you really want a bioinformatician to have seriously core skills in analytics, programming, statistics. And then we also had sort of a different stream. So we developed 2 possible streams if you want to be more of a scientist to go into more sort of an analytics versus an engineer going into more core development. So what we found there was actually we had a number of challenges, both even when people were trying to set up these courses. And how do you actually design your curriculum? So we have some ideas, but the content constantly changes. There's so many different topics in bioinformatics. How do you put them all together in a proper curriculum? What level of competency do you go into with each of these topics? But then also trainers. There were not enough trainers on the continent, so people try to start up new bioinformatics degree programs because there's not enough bioinformatics there, which means there's usually not enough bioinformatics faculty that have enough skills in bioinformatics in general, but also they don't have enough skills in actual training. How many lecturers at university actually get training in how to train? My university doesn't teach you how to train or teach you how to teach or teach you how to design a course. You just kind of come into the position and you're just expected to do it. So we also have a problem of the background of the trainees. So when we surveyed all our trainees from different levels, so from your masters, PhDs, undergraduates, the sysadmins we were training, the developers we were training, the clinicians we were training, they all came in with a very different level of skills and a very different background. So you try to teach a course to a group of people, some of which, I mean, we're teaching some bioinformatics courses to people who don't even know what DNA is because they're engineers or they came in from a maths background. And you start talking about genetics and mutations and, GWAS, and they don't even know what DNA is. So you're starting off from, very basic, and then you try and, run a pipeline when your biologists have never done Unix. They just don't know basic commands. So that's been a huge challenge for us. And then they have very different expectations of the course. So you think you've run a great course. Some people come out and say, oh, you went far too fast, I was so lost. And other people say, I was thoroughly bored, you went far too slow. And that's in the same course. They were all in the same room and totally different. And that's because of the backgrounds they came from. We've also had challenges with how to reach the audience, which is the best mode of training. So we run face-to-face courses where we have a group of people coming into one room. So we have a group of people in one room where you can all actually work together. And it's not just having that face-to-face intense work with a lecturer, but it's also the networking that happens in the classroom that's very, very important. But again, that intensity is quite difficult because people don't really have the time to let things digest, apply it. You've got to get everything done in 5 days because you've flown them in. So there's some advantages and disadvantages of that. And then some of our other ways of teaching would be internships. So people bring their data and they actually sit with somebody for 6 months. That's a lot more relaxed and useful, but then you reach one person. So then we moved to live online training where we had real classrooms in different places and then people delivering, so they're all connected online at the same time. And that had the advantage of reaching a very wide audience. So in our last course, we had 700 participants across 30 different classrooms. But again, that comes with challenges. And then we also run hackathons, which are, but they're more goal-driven. It's less about, so you do get skills transfer, but it's more about developing a software, developing workflows, or analyzing a data set. So again, we did a survey to try and identify what the advantages and disadvantages of each of these were. And the face-to-face classes are expensive, but they obviously give you that networking and ability to come together and have that really close time with your lecturer. The online courses, much cheaper. We don't charge anything for them. They're completely free, but you need a lot of volunteers. You reach a wide audience, but then you don't have that ready access. But we do, what's nice about our online courses is they run over several months. So you go there twice a week, and then you've got time for the rest of the week to digest something, and then you can kind of synthesize your questions. Sometimes it's only later that you have the questions that you want to ask of the lecturer. And then we surveyed some of our people to see people who've been on these courses and new people who want to run courses, who go to courses, what mode they would prefer. And it was actually very different by different groups. So developers were quite happy to do self-taught stuff. The biologists tended to want to be all together in a room. And some were happy to do internships. So it was very varied by, who the audience was, and there wasn't any real kind of pattern as to which is best. Can I move this slide? Sorry, I can't see my slides over there with the talk over here. So there are many other challenges. So those are our challenges, and those came out of what we've done. And but if you look, we speak to people at these workshops, and there are very generic challenges in bioinformatics. So as I said, there's no doubt that the demand is huge. But can I move over there? So we have everybody's generating big data. So even where our bench biologists who never needed to do anything before, suddenly they need to deal with data. Just simply moving data, managing data, curating data, making sure the metadata is correct. They cannot even do that. So the demand is increasing. The range of topics is increasing. We don't have enough trainers, certainly from our perspective. We don't have enough courses. The courses usually require hands-on work, so it's not like you can just prepare a set of lectures, put them on YouTube and say, go watch those. You actually need some practical experience because it's a practical thing that you're doing. Bioinformatics is very practical and hands-on. And ideally, then the courses should be linked to a project. So what we find is that people will say, I really need training in NGS. They'll come to the course, but if they haven't got their data yet, they're not ready, and then they'll, 2 months, 3 months later, when they've got their data or the project that they want to implement, they actually need to retrain. So you need to really be thinking that the participants need to come with their project, come with their data, so that they can immediately apply what they've learned. And as I said, the field is very broad and interdisciplinary. So this is, maybe you can't see that, just some of the topics of the training materials on goblets. The range of topics in bioinformatics is huge. It's like saying, let's run a course in biochemistry. It's a massive field. So, and being interdisciplinary, it's anything from your hardcore biostatistics to, a simple blast search and alignments. So it's very difficult to address all of those needs. And then the user base, the trainees, as I said, are also very broad. So your audience that you might be targeting is very, very broad in terms of the different kinds of people you'll be getting at university, including professionals. So then more specifically, some of the challenges with the trainees, diverse backgrounds, varying level of skills. So again, the expectations that they come out with, that they come into a course with are completely different. And so you actually, I don't know how many people have ever taught a course where you didn't get one bad comment or somebody that was kind of a bit miserable, because maybe they came in with a totally different skill set to everybody else. They should have their own project, but then often it's difficult to customize, your practical exercises for different people's projects, different people's challenges. And bioinformatics is not a plug and play, one size fits all. Actually, most software needs to be customized. Most workflows need to be kind of customized a little bit for each person's project. And I think the main thing we found is that once the students go home, they don't have support after the course. For trainers, and this is what we're mostly talking about here, is the trainers. They also come from a diverse set of backgrounds. Are they expected to just know every kind of topic in bioinformatics? It's not possible. You can look up some things, but people tend to have an area of speciality. You can't know everything, and yet when you only have 1 or 2 faculty in a university, you're expected to teach pretty much everything. The field is constantly changing. So when your slides were current and exciting one year, the next year they're probably going to be completely out of date. You just need to go to the posters and the talks here to see how fast this field is moving. New technologies are being generated, new data types are being generated, the algorithms are changing. So every year you have to update your materials and the software and the practical data sets. So to address some of these challenges, we decided to try and bring trainers together. So this has happened through a few different initiatives. So GOBLET, the Global Organization for Bioinformatics Learning, Education and Training. This is a community of trainers, so people can become an institutional or an individual member. And the idea there is to have a group of trainers that can share experiences, solve problems together. ISMB, the ISCB Education Committee, is also an opportunity, and now obviously the ISCB Education Cozy is a bigger community now to bring everybody together to do things. But what we find is that we will meet here, we'll have the talks, we'll have our 1-hour session, and then we'll all disappear. We won't see each other for a year. And there's only so much you can get done in one hour. Everybody goes home, they have their day job, and so nothing gets done. We've also found that from previous competency workshops, there were a lot of questions that were coming out. More recently, the ISCBs asked the Education Committee to start thinking about endorsements of courses. People want to have their courses ISCB, not accredited, but ISCB endorsed. We have the challenge of employers not knowing the quality of different master's programs. And then there were just many other things that we needed, kind of the reasons to bring trainers together. And so we needed to build some guidelines, documents, and other resources. So it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and finally we decided to just go ahead and do it, was to organize a Bioinformatics Education Summit. So we had that in Cape Town in May this year, and so the aim there was to bring bioinformatics trainers and educators together to develop resources for other bioinformatics trainers and educators. So it wasn't for trainees, it wasn't going to be a set of talks and seminars, it was going to be a completely working session. So it was co-organized by, so we hosted it in Eshrei Bainet, so it was co-organized with Goblet, the ISCB Education Committee, and the Alexa training platform. So we tackled 4 main tasks in this. So this was curriculum and competencies. And they were split into 2 streams, one for degree programs and one for short courses. Then we also had a group looking at curriculum endorsement and or accreditation, again with 2 streams. Then we looked at train the trainer facilities and a trainer portal. And as I said, the format was not to sit and listen to hundreds of talks, but to have breakout sessions and to work. So everybody came to work for 5 days. So people split, we had many sessions together, big discussions together, and then we had breakout sessions where people could tackle very specific documents and actually sit and write those documents. So the first section that I'll talk about is the competencies and curriculum development. So for those who don't know what is a competency, it's something that you need to do in your job. So it's an ability you have to do something. And in order to demonstrate this, you should be able to perform a particular task at a certain level of proficiency. And so a competency can be broken down into skills or tasks, and you should be able to measure this. And then the other thing, so we'd originally just sort of said competencies, but then for each competency, you actually need to have a different level of knowledge, skills, and abilities. So, for example, the knowledge is something that you can measure. You know something about a particular topic or something that you need to do, and you can be trained in that. A skill is something that you implement something, so it's measurable through testing. An ability or an attitude, so this is how you function on the job. So, for example, programming is a competency that brings knowledge of a given programming language together with code writing skills. And then the attitude would be the analytical, logical thought to actually write the program. So this was reported last year. ISCB put together this set of competencies. There were several iterations of it. And this is one of the papers that came out. So it started off by developing these 3 different personas, the bioinformatics user, the scientist, and the engineer. That's where we got ours from. And then it was later extended and mapped to Bloom's. So a persona is basically a fictional character. So if you think about all the different people that you come across in your day job or the trainees that you come across, how would you define them? So we ended up splitting those 3 into a much larger group, because within a bioinformatics user, you're going to have a different set of competencies required for a physician compared to a biocurator or a lab technician or a pathologist. Same with bioinformatics scientists and engineers. So they were broken down to be much more fine-grained. And then you can also, in this process, we actually created characters. We put names to people. Kath is a person here who does this, and she needs to do this in her day job. And it was much easier because you could relate to this to actually define what competencies that person needed. And then we'd previously started with another way of measuring the level of competencies, and then we switched to the Bloom's revised taxonomy, which is basically starting from just having knowledge about something to being able to evaluate. So really knowing a topic so well that you can actually you do synthesis and then evaluation of this. So it's an increasing complexity. And not every competency will have the same level that's required. So what we wanted to tackle at the Cape Town meeting was that some of the issues that we had previously was that participants struggle to differentiate between learning outcomes and competencies. Participants struggle to map competencies to existing courses. So we've had many exercises where we've taken a course and tried to map them and come across a number of challenges. Participants don't understand how to identify and modify competency levels using these personas. So when you get a group of people together and you say, this is the persona, this is the competency, what level of Bloom's? If there are 5 different people, you might get 5 different levels suggested. So it's really difficult to settle on what is the actual level that you think, because different people have different thoughts on that. And then some people struggle to understand the difference between a competency and the Bloom's taxonomy. So isn't the competency enough? But it's not, actually. You need the competency at a particular level. So the aim of the session was to refine the competencies, to add knowledge, skills, and abilities, because we didn't have that yet in the ISCB competencies, and then to develop guideline document for how you would apply these competencies to mapping an existing course, a short course or a degree program, but also how you would actually develop, because now you actually should do it the other way around, you should develop your courses based on the competencies required. So these were the guidelines documents we set out to achieve. So the starting point for the competencies was this is a snapshot of the original list of competencies for the ISCB one. So those are the persona across the top and the competencies down the bottom, and then in each is one of the Bloom's taxonomies. So what we ended up with, and I'm just going to go through some of the outputs in just briefly, because the group starting at the web session will actually go through some of these in a bit more detail. But what we ended up with was for each of those competencies, what do you need to know to exhibit a competency in this area? What skills do you need? So we actually filled in these the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And then we also had this behaviors that we filled in. And it was actually quite challenging to fill in all of these for every single competency, because not everyone agreed. So that was the competencies, and Kath will talk a bit more about the completion of those, and they were completed. And so the board they just need to be kind of ratified by just checked by the ISCB board of directors, given it is an ISCB competency, but they're pretty much ready for release. So the next thing was to develop guidelines for developing and updating short courses using this competency framework. So the guidelines document basically talk to what is a competency, what are the challenges, what is the framework. It provides a list of all the different possible competencies, describes the ISCB competency, and then the course development and design process, what considerations you need to have, guidelines for mapping a course, or guidelines for designing a new course based on these. And it's going to be slightly different for a degree program versus a short course. So the kind of the workflow is that that's being proposed is that this is for designing a new course based on competencies. You define your course objectives and learning outcomes, and then you identify the competencies that are needed. So you'll go look at the list of competencies, identify the competencies, create a table, and then put in the level of the Bloom's level that's required for each of those competencies. Then you use that to add content. So you look at the content that you want to add and say, does that content actually give you that competency? Including things like, well, how am I assessing that competency? How am I assessing that skill? How am I assessing the knowledge that the competency has? Then once you've got that for your entire course, you can look for overlapping content, merge those, remove redundancy, flesh out the curriculum, so look at the depth of the content, how long you need to teach each thing, considering all these KSAs, and then also determine the assessment method. And the tools that we developed to do this would be the competency frameworks themselves, course materials that you can actually source from many different places, and you'll see later we've also got some example assessments. And then if you've already got a course and you want to go back and map competencies to it, you would, for degree programs, you could basically, there's some templates that we're providing where you can get your curriculum, and then you score competencies for each module, you sum up the scores of the competencies, and you look for gaps. So you see, well, I had a list of competencies I need for my degree program. Where is there a gap? Where am I not addressing that? And then fill those gaps with additional modules or content. For the courses, you can decide on the Bloom's level for each course, map to specific KSAs, and again, identify and fill the gaps. So it sounds obvious, these processes, but when you come to do it, it's actually not that obvious, and having the templates available to show you how to do that, how to fill it in, is just useful. So these will all be available from the workshop. So the second thing we set out to do was to look at course endorsement or affiliation. At first we call it accreditation, but ISCB is not an accreditation body. I've kept the word accreditation in some of this because when you come to do obviously a degree program, it is actually accredited by your university. But in this case, we were looking for an endorsement because the ISCB has been approached by various people to say, can you endorse or can you accredit or affiliate my course with the ISCB? And the ISCB don't want to just put any old course on there and say this is a bioinformatics course, and then you're kind of measured by that people think, oh well, that must be a good course. So they wanted a process that they could use to evaluate courses to say should it be a real affiliate or an endorsed course by ISCB. The other reason, which I've mentioned a few times, is that certainly for the degree programs, but if you see somebody's CV, they've done this course and they've done this degree, how do you know they've actually got the skills? And so this endorsement program is, if you've got that stamp on it, then it's recognized that you have the right bioinformatics skills and you've been trained in the correct way. So for the degree programs, we wanted to find what is the minimum content required to train a bioinformatician or to give you a proper bioinformatics degree. And then, of course, we had to do all the admin stuff, like how would you set up this process for accreditation, how will you do the reviews, and how will you actually implement it. So the two outputs here are the guidelines document on the criteria and the process. So for the short courses, some of the decisions or some of the thoughts, actually they're not quite decisions yet, but some of the thoughts would be that for ISCB affiliated courses, what is the motivation for being ISCB affiliated? Well, you get up, a prominent position in their websites, in their newsletter, when people are advertising things. You can have your course announced in their announcement mailing lists and ISMBs. And then it's recognized then that if you've got the stamp that the course meets at least one of the ISCB competency requirements or criteria. And then for the course, what does ISCB get from the course? Well, they get the logo. They get to put the logo on their course. They have to provide a minimum 15% discount off the course if you're an ISCB member. So there must be some reason why ISCB would endorse this, and some sort of encouragement from ISCB to apply for this course. So the guidelines document is simply, what is the application form, so all the different things, and that includes then what is the criteria by which the course is assessed, encouraging people to use bioschemas to be curating the course, and then the guidelines for the evaluation. So of course in all of these we're going to need reviewers, so don't forget to sign up and volunteer. And then for the degree program, what the degree program would receive would again be a listing on the website, a certification from the ISCB that can be displayed on the program website, and then announcement of the program. So there are one or two programs that are actually listed on the ISCB education website because people have asked, but really this is to make it a more formal process of what ISCB recognizes as a bona fide degree program. And then ISCB receives their link, and they get a nominal application fee. This is simply to manage the administration of the review process. So again, the two main documents, the application form itself and the process guidelines. So this application form is a bit more complicated because you have to sort of start defining what is the minimum criteria for a bioinformatics degree. And I think very many people have very different ideas of that. There are some core things that you want to teach bioinformaticians. But again, it depends on your output. Is it a bioinformatics scientist you're training or a bioinformatics engineer? Some bioinformatics degree programs are in the engineering department, in which case they have very specific university requirements for what they're allowed to put into their degrees. So there has to be some flexibility in terms of what you define as the minimum required content. But it's also things like, well, did you define the course properly? Did you define the learning outcomes properly? Are you having an appropriate assessment of the trainers? Are you assessing the actual practical skills as well as just their knowledge? So this document's still under development, but I think it's a bit more complicated than a short course. So then the next topic that we tackled was train the trainer, because this was all about trainers. And as I said, many trainers actually don't receive training in how to teach. So there's several train the trainer programs out there. We wanted to see what is the overlap between the content. Can they come together? Can they share the resources? What should trainers be taught? This shouldn't be based on a particular topic. It should be based on training. And then we also wanted to develop an online train-the-trainer course that could be rolled out to many different places and provide a trainer platform that the community of trainers could then actually come together and use. So the outputs of this section was a train-the-trainer online course, with including the content, trainer guidelines, and a trainer portal. So some of the existing train-the-trainer activities, so we've been doing, we have a little program that we are training a whole lot of carpentries trainers. So we obviously rely on the software data carpentries. They have their own train-the-trainer program. So we do that. So it's just a matter of coordinating that we have enough trainers in different regions. We've done NGS trainers, and that was actually with the EBI. So the EBI run a train-the-trainer program, and we had a number of our people going over there. But then after that, those same people then also they were teaching assistants on a Wellcome Trust overseas program NGS course. And then after that, they actually spent 3 days together in a room consolidating training materials, the workflows, everything around the training, so that they really had a package of NGS materials and modalities for training in this area. And they've got a general train-the-trainer plan. And then Wellcome Trust has been doing some train-the-trainer as well. So they tailor this to based on the content for their overseas program. And the idea for them is to develop skills, knowledge, and confidence in training. So this is just an outline of some of theirs. They do a day or 1.5 days before a course, then the actual normal course would run, as in you're teaching other people, where these trainers are now hanging out in the background, learning the content, and at the end of the course, they'll come back together for more train-the-trainer sections. So that's the first section and the second. So it's a lot of closed discussion and review and reflection. And then the EBI also has this train-the-trainer course, and so a lot of the materials that we've taken, actually, because Sarah was running this section, was taken from what the EBI train-the-trainer program is. So some of the things that we decided that the trainer needs is training on how to design and deliver courses. So it's not just how to train, but it's also how do you design a course? What is the best way of delivering that course? How much practical, how much interaction with the students? They needed access to trainer resources, training materials. They needed practice and training, so other opportunities for them and go to be teaching assistants in various places. And then we wanted to have this training community and a discussion forum for trainers. So for the train-the-trainer online course, so the learning outcomes of a train-the-trainer course, we decided would be that the trainees are expected to be able to recognize that trainers respond to different learning methods, to be able to design a course on a specific topic, so that actually have to be given a topic and then actually have to try and design the course themselves. We did this exercise once, and it was amazing. Then each group had to criticize the other group, and there was a lot of criticism, because if you've never designed a course before, you make a lot of mistakes. So it's a very, very useful program to come together and be critiqued by other trainers. And the other thing was to develop an appropriate set of training materials so that when they go back, they don't have to spend too much time sourcing those. Learn how to organize and deliver a course to a very specific audience, so the audience matters. To assess the effectiveness of the course, so how do you assess how well you did and how well the students did, and then reflect on the outcomes and how you would improve the course. So some of the indicative content, so this is a kind of a skills matrix from Sarah. So you need to have information, you need to have skills in communication, planning and management, expertise and knowledge in a particular topic, and then trainee engagement. So it's not just that any bioinformatician can go give a really good course. You actually need all of these additional skills to be able to do it. So the indicative content includes how people learn, reflection, facilitation, how do you facilitate things, actually doing the competency mapping, how do you schedule a course, making the course materials fair, assessment, feedback, etc. So we also agreed that because these groups wanted to come together and run these courses quite regularly, we'd have already had a discussion with the Wellcome Trust that we're going to run an online train-the-trainer course for people all over the world, because it's really difficult to reach a big audience. So we thought that we would run a course, maybe running over up to 2 months. So our courses we run over several months, and we run it maybe 2 days a week for 2 or 3 hours on those days. So we have distributed classrooms. So each classroom will be a physical classroom with a teaching assistant. And then we have a platform, an online platform, so the trainers would record their lectures, the classroom will all get together at the same time, watch the lectures, and then all the classrooms go live together on a platform like Zoom or MConf or Adobe, and ask questions. So then they would all kind of work together and have some practical chatting and experience together. And then there's an offline conference, a system which we use, Sakai, where you can manage the assessments and training materials. But the idea is to use the same facility and actually run online trainer courses. So as I said, Wellcome Trust is interested, we are interested in doing it, and I think Goblet and Alexa are also interested in doing that. So we just need to think about the practicalities of timelines, of time zones. So we'd probably have to split it up. But if people are interested in having an online trainer course, then this will become available. So this is just showing some of the different classrooms and the different kind of modalities. So in the bottom one, you can see the training materials on the middle, and then all the classrooms that are linked on the left, and then their chat sessions on the right. So it's a way of setting up a community of trainers that are very diverse across very different geographical locations, but teaching them all at the same time on the same content. So the progress with that is that the content, the curriculum's been decided. We now actually just need to source the content and set up the actual course and when to run that online course on the platform. So then the last thing we looked at was trainer resources. I know these are all trainer resources, but we have basically developed this guidelines document. So as a trainer, there's just so many different places. There are documents, you can't find the documents, they're all in different places. So we just wanted to have a single document where a trainer could go to say, how can I find out about training and training skills? What makes a good trainer? How do people learn? How do I design my courses? So all of those things that you would have learned in the trainer, there's actually a guidelines document. So if you don't need to, if you don't go to a course, you can go and find all this in the document. And then a lot of those will link to what we call a trainer portal. So if you think about the process, so you have a trainer, the trainer needs to get certain skills. They need to then apply those skills to design courses. Then once they've got a course, they need to think about the logistics. They need to think about advertising those courses. They need to then create the course materials, map them to competencies, make those course materials fair and available to people, source the software, and then once you've run the course, do the assessments of the trainees, but then also assessment of the course itself, evaluation of the course, and then think about whether you want your course endorsed or accredited. So you can see a lot of the pieces of this sort of workflow are what I've been discussing already. We're trying to fill in something for every piece of these so that a trainer can go to one place and find every single component of this that they need. And so the trainer portal that's been developed is based on, it's sort of set on different questions, so that, what skills do I need to be a good trainer? And then there'll be links to trainer guidelines, the online lectures, course materials, blogs, resources for improving presentation skills. So these are just things that we kind of hacked together when we were brainstorming in Cape Town, but there are many other things that people might want to put together. And it's really just about putting them all in one place. Then another question is how do I design and develop courses? So then you'd go back to this guidelines document for the competencies, the link to the ISCB competencies and all other possible competency frameworks in case you didn't like the ISCB ones. How do I make my training materials fair? But then also, so the existing, finding the training materials. So we know that Goblet's already, maybe some of you don't know, but Goblet already has a list of training materials. They're all totally, completely available. You can just search materials, you can use them and reuse them, obviously just with credit. So a lot of time spent for when you're designing a new course is designing the course materials. So go source the training material from there and then test as well. So the Alexa training platform already has a set of training materials. So then just coming back to making the training materials fair, I think it's really important actually that training materials are accessible and that they are fair. So you can do this by making the training itself widely accessible, so people have access to their training and through these online courses. Use bioschemas for your training materials. Map the training materials to the EDAM ontology, and then make them findable via something like TESS or Goblet. So in order to do that, we've also on this trainer portal, we've got information about the Alexa Fair Training Working Group, information about how to make your training materials fair, on the ontology, a link to the ontologies, and various other things. And then one of the people who was at the workshop was from Bioschemas. So for those who don't know Bioschemas, it's basically a way to manage metadata to make it searchable. So when Google does indexing for searching, it's quite random according to how it thinks that things are organized. But if you, so the schemas.org, and then there's now this bioschemas.org, is a way to, it's a lightweight way of structuring data so that it's very easily indexed for searching and finding. So the Bioschemas is a consortium that was trying to create these schemas specifically for biological or life sciences materials or items on the web. And then very specifically, there's a group working on training itself. So training has got 3 different parts to it. There's course instance, there's the course itself, and there's the training material. And each of these has this metadata schema. So this is just one of the examples. So the minimum things that you should have, the core things in the bioschemas that everybody should have, core fields, and there's a description about what that field is. And then there's some additional optional things. But really, when you're running a course, there really are some basic things that you need to be putting in there. So if you want to be endorsed, you have to, for example, set your learning outcomes and what is it that you're trying to achieve in this course. But when you're trying to advertise a course, people need to know where is it running, what's the audience, what's the closing date, what are the requirements, how much is it going to cost me. And so Bioschemas is designed to have a standard format for this so that all these courses can be described the same way and searchable. And then finally, some of the other practical things about courses. So how do I organize and deliver training? So we think very much about training trainers and setting the content and that, but there's more to running a course. You have to decide on the venue, you have to decide on the software. You have to think about how am I going to send out the advert for the course? What are the logistics? How do I book the tickets? And so because we've been running so many different courses, we actually have templates for all of these. We have an airline booking form. We have a template for proposing a course, for budgeting a course, for applicant selection, for registrations of a course, for application forms, and a best practices document. So we're just going to make all of these templates available so that anybody can just, if you want to run a course, download the templates and plug and play and go. Just change the name and the title. And then there are also methods for, there's links to methods for assessing trainers and also formal assessment. So the examples. So often when people are trying to run a course or do a post-course evaluation, you don't want to think of all the questions from scratch. Loads of people have done this. Just take some of the examples and adapt them. We don't need to put in hours reinventing the wheel. Same for evaluating a course. So that's, how would you design a survey to really evaluate your course properly? And it's actually not that easy because we've run a survey, and only when you try to analyze the results do you see, I should have asked the question a different way. It hasn't really given me the answer. So we've actually learned a lot from the EBI. They've run many different post-course evaluations, and a way to really ask the question the right way to really determine what the impact of the course is. So again, don't reinvent the wheel. Go see how other people have done it and how they report on their courses. And then there'll be links to how to accredit the course, what are considered. So we've also got a section on high school teaching. So how do you teach bioinformatics to high school teachers? And then finding other areas of support. So the summary of kind of the outputs that we wanted to produce at the summit was these refined competencies and with the KSAs, guidelines for mapping courses and degree programs to these, and guidelines for creating a course based on these and developing curricula, criteria for endorsement and accreditation, train the trainer online materials and an actual course to run, guidelines documents in this trainer portal content. So we did achieve, we actually got a significant way through almost all of these. There are only probably a couple that we can say are just about finished because they'll always be kind of work in progress, but we've got to at some point finish that. So the aim of the workshop after this is to take some of these, get your inputs on them and help to develop them a bit further because certainly this has been the experience of the group in the room, but people will come in with their own experiences and think, well, I actually need this or I need this or I don't agree with that. So the aim of the web is to get your input and finish these documents. And we need to think about timelines, but These are not, again, we'll go home from here and then we'll all go back to our day jobs and forget. So I think CAT's planning to organize another education summit next year in May. But the aim is to get these done. I would like these out on the website and finished before the end of this year so that trainers can actually start using them. So, we had a lot of work. We did a lot of work. People worked really, really hard and gave a lot of their time, but we also had some fun. And so, I think I've already talked about the way forward. These documents will all be put on the ISCB website, the Goblet website, our website. But if you've got any training websites, you're welcome to take and use all the outputs as well. So we need to recruit volunteers to help. And so I'd just like to thank all the people that were involved in the workshop, but also all of you trainers who spend a lot of your time creating training materials and training to address that huge need for bioinformatics training in the world. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Nikki. And please do use the microphones because I think we're being recorded.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm sorry I couldn't have attended more of the summit because it was fantastic. I just want to ask one question and make one comment. For the Goblet website, I know I'll give you all an update. So I know that the new Goblet website, probably to be released September, I'm looking at Celia, shake your head, yes, that will have, as you described, the trainer portal with all the resources on it. So that will be there, the resources portal, and that the training materials aspect will actually just pull from TESS. Okay. So that is brings the two together. My question for you is: you discussed charging for degree program accreditation. Did you discuss charging for course? Because I can imagine the volume being higher in one and not the other, but we're charging only for one but not the other.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want we didn't want there to be a barrier to accreditation. So it's actually a nominal fee just to cover the admin. I think the admin required to evaluate a degree program, as in the review required, is quite substantial compared to a course. But I think we probably do want to think about a nominal fee, whether it's $50 or something, because it does just stop everybody from submitting. Yeah.
So we did quite a lot of research from other professional bodies. We looked at how other professional bodies handle both full-scale endorsement of courses, and David's in the audience, so he might want to say something about how Dundee does it, because, yeah, there he is. They've worked with the Royal Society of Biology to get their entire degree programme endorsed, and the RSB spent years cogitating how best to do this and how best to ensure that it was kind of break even for the RSB. There have to be gains on both sides. There have to be benefits to the people who are organising the courses, and there have to be some benefits to the ISCB, because otherwise why would we be doing this? So we're still at the very, very early stages of this, and getting the balance between those two things right is probably going to take time and is going to need your input.
Can I just speak to that? Okay, so in Dundee we do have all of our degrees accredited through the Royal Society of Biology, which has spent quite some time working out how to accredit degrees at various different levels. So they have a basic accreditation and an advanced accreditation. The workload is quite phenomenal. Unfortunately, I've not been the one who's had to do it, but my colleagues who have, it does take a considerable amount of time, both at the preparation side and on the review side. So I would say that the fee that you are charging is absolutely nominal in terms of the workload expected from the submitting institute, the admin, and the reviewers. Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting talk. Lots of great thinking here, and it really speaks to how complex and extensive the field has become. To me, the idea that somehow you can say, well, anybody who comes out of this program is is golden and is going to solve the problems that my company needs is a little crazy, because there's, as you pointed out, there are so many different roles that people are trying to assume. And let's say a master's program. If you had a single master's program in bioinformatics, it's probably going to be trying to prepare people for many different roles. Yeah. And everybody's probably going to take a different path through the program in terms of what courses they take. So it just strikes me as a really difficult problem. And when I hire somebody, I look at what courses they've taken, and is that a match for the competencies I'm trying to fill? That's how I, as an employer, tend to hire people. And yeah, there are just so many roles from, and something I think to emphasize in the different roles that you bring out is somebody expected to develop code or use existing tools. That's such a critical distinction, I think. But even within that distinction, somebody who's doing database programming versus machine learning programming versus user interface development, hugely different skill set on the computer science side.
And that's exactly what the huge challenge is that, and how do you measure that? But also, you need to know how well they did. Just because they were in that module, it didn't mean they did very well in that module.
Well, right.
Yeah. So it is a huge, huge challenge. So when I look at, when think about my students, what they're going to do afterwards, I say, go look at some job descriptions where they actually say what the requirements are, and then try to get those specific skills. Yeah. And so I think, just coming out with a degree program, we know that there's a nominal amount of practical required, but it's only actually when you get into a job and you get some experience. So if somebody's just got a master's degree, I'm unlikely to hire them as a bioinformatician that's going to hit the ground running until they've actually been in a situation where they've had to take somebody else's data and analyze it. So I think in bioinformatics, it's not just the theory and, yes, a little bit of practice with a beautiful data set that's going to work because that's practical. But it's working with real-life data. But then coming back to one of your points about the algorithm versus the analytics, and that's where if we know what the degree program what it looks like, we can see how much analytical stuff there is versus core skills versus just content. Oh, this is what you would do in population genetics versus biostatistics of population genetics. So that's why I would kind of want to go and see the topics of each program, and they're all so different. So it is, yeah, you've highlighted many more challenges that I haven't even highlighted, but it is a huge problem as employers, but also as the students trying to get trained in specific areas. And then that field changes. Then a new technology comes. And of course, nobody's had a course in that area yet, so you've got to start from scratch and retrain.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge.
And this is, of course, why we've developed the competency framework and why we're going to map the courses that we endorse to that competency framework, because at least it gets you part of the way there.
Thanks so much. I want to follow up on. I think try and have a separate discussion afterwards. Certainly, the online training for trainers, really interested in that. I'd like to send some of our clinical bioinformatics training team onto that. Sort of coming on to the clinical side of things, so I didn't see much mention, I know it's something Kath has worked on in the past, on the sort of clinical health persona, if you like, of people that are working in that space. There are some sort of special considerations in terms of ISO accreditation, governance, all those kinds of things that would apply to clinical bioinformaticians working in that field. Have you got any plans to consider that or think about that?
So the competencies does include a section on like ethics and things like that, but certainly it's not tailored for any one particular audience because it's designed to be, if we did that, I think the list of competencies would be huge. So that's where, as what Vicky was talking about last night, is we then have a separate genomic medicine course where we have a mixture of competencies that came from the bioinformatics versus in addition to the ones that came from the Genomics England the NHLS one. So I think if you're trying to get to all of those audiences, it's going to be too much. So this is the bioinformatics part of a clinical training program. So we would expect somebody else, for example, to worry about the genetic counseling, the clinical tests, that sort of side of things, and we'll just worry about what you need to do on the bioinformatics skills of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more, I'm not really concerned with the counselors. This is like people that are working as clinical bioinformaticians within healthcare. So they do need software engineering skills. Yep. They're working at the clinical interface sometimes. They're looking at infrastructure. they're a new breed.
Yeah, so one of our persona is a physician, and there's one, well, they're lab techs and that. So again, people have said, we split it from 3, we went from 3 to about 9, and actually we could go to 20. So I think this is where each person, once you know how to do this, each person takes their persona that's relevant to them. And it doesn't mean you can't add competencies to that. It's just that we had to stop somewhere.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
And the mapping to other frameworks is really important there. So, if we've got a clinical bioinformatics framework in the UK for bioinformatics engineering. Engineers Australia has been mapped onto courses that have also been mapped onto the ISCB framework. So we can create these mappings, actually. Thinking of next year's summit meeting, if there are specific topics, perhaps we ought to have a dot vote or something towards the end of the workshop, because it would be great to get your input on things that we might want to work on for the future. So I'll think about how we set that up over the coffee break.
And volunteers to join the summit.
Yeah, absolutely. Patricia.
Thanks a lot, Nikki, for the talk. It's great to see all what you have achieved during the summit. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. And one thing that I want to tell everybody also, that we have developed the trainer program also together with Elixir and Goblet, and all materials that we have are on GitHub, online and available to anyone. And
so that was actually presented at the summit by Sarah, the Elixir one.
And the slides are also in the GitHub, and all the materials are for anyone to take them and use them. And we are currently working in another version that we are going to develop also more on teaching people how to teach the materials also, helping the new trainers to do the train-to-trainer. And another thing is the summit. Can we have the dates already for the next year's summits? Because it would be nice that we can get ourselves organized in advance. So it would be great if we can have that, so we can volunteer to
Still
attend.
double checking, but it looks like it's going to be the week of the 18th of May next year. So I can't completely confirm it,
but around those lines.
It's and that'll be in Hinxton. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
So one more question, and then I think we should close.
Sure, a couple more thoughts. It's going back to these different roles that you've defined. I think it would be great if somebody wrote a publication that was a kind of a guide both to students and to trainers about these different roles, how to think about the field, how to think about what kind of role you're preparing yourself for as a student, and a kind of a guide to weaving your way through different curriculums to satisfy different goals that the students might have.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So Jack van Horn actually gave a talk at this. I've given a talk on it before on the Erudite platform, which has these learning paths. So they've developed algorithms to look at all training materials, and you can come in and say, in your career, you can say, I'm starting at this point. I want to get to that point, and it actually gives you a learning path to that with example materials. Mm-hmm. So something like that would be useful. But I think it's a great idea. I hope you're going to volunteer to do that. But so for the students who are coming in to think about where they want to be, what kind of bioinformatician do they want to be, because bioinformatician is so broad, and then how would you undergo the process to get to that point? I think that's a really, really good idea.
And if I have time for another one quick comment, looking at the training portal, there's a lot of great stuff there. I'd suggest reorganizing it more as kind of hierarchical set of topics, because already there are so many items that just going through the list is a little much. But I'd also suggest a lot of the materials there are basically using tool X to do task Y, whereas I'd like to see something one level up, which is what is the different set of tools that exists in some field? What are their relative strengths and weaknesses? When would you choose one tool over another to solve a different problem, so that you get a bit broader view of the space?
Yeah, so this initial one was just to pull everything together, and hopefully actually the next summit can now do actually benchmarking and evaluation of what's there. Because again, yes, we're going to pull everything together, but then you're still going to end up with a huge number of things to get through. So I think some sort of formative evaluation, some sort of guidance, I think we can certainly work on that for the next one. Thanks.
Though, to comment on that, I think there's already exists a resource that does that. There's omics Omics tools, and it has all the tools, and it grades them as which one is still being maintained, in what order do you use it, and it's organized by analysis that you might want to do.
So you're talking about software tools. I thought you were talking about educational tools. You were talking about software tools.
I meant to say software tools.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we shouldn't redo.
And there's also the Alexia tools portal. Yeah. Yeah.
Catalog of like I think 1,500 bioinformatics tools, and there's also significant benchmarking activities in progress. So it might be worth looking into that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should close the session. Let's thank Nikki again.